Welcome to the Intrazone. Actually, this Intrazone is going to have some sound effects in the back because we're actually at a place called WonderWorks. And you'll hear some beep bops, and Chris is going to make some doop-doops and things like that.
What are you doing?
But we are here to welcome you to the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet Show, the Intrazone. I'm Mark Cashman, here with Chris McNulty.
Well, today we are live at Ignite, or near Ignite, in
Very near.
the Wonder World, which, if you're familiar with Orlando, is the upside-down house just up the road. But today we're sitting down with Jeff Teper, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft. Jeff, thank you for coming in.
It is great to be back, guys. This is always fun. Another conference, a lot of new stuff to talk about.
Can you just give us a visual description of your clothing? Because you're wearing a cool shirt and cool shoes that represent some things. If you could just give us an audible description.
Yeah, so shoes are from Vans Custom Shop with the OneDrive logo tiled all over it. I waited for the new OneDrive logo last year and ordered those. And then I had to do something new for a new conference. And so I hunted around for the exact shade of teal that's used in the SharePoint logo in T-shirts. And it's actually very hard to find a high-quality T-shirt. And sure enough, I don't get a commission, but Hugo Boss does have a high-quality teal shirt that I think looked okay in the keynote. And so I'm bringing it with both SharePoint and OneDrive today.
It really did look great when you have the SharePoint logo up behind you.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that effect.
Yeah.
Hugo Boss, I think we'll say you are the boss in SharePoint teal.
Oh, so. I didn't even made that connection.
So apart from sartorial splendor, how's day one for Ignite for you? Is it fun?
It's great. You know, it's you have so much anticipation getting ready for your talk that our session was in the afternoon, as you know, like I want to get there already. So it's great to get it out there and see the response from people like in the corridors at Ignite and online. So all good.
I also have to say, I know that it's more difficult than it looks because a lot of times our structure, and for the audience who hasn't seen this yet, is you'll tee up the value proposition and we'll cycle people on and off, and everything's going in 5 or 7 minute increments. You held the entire session entirely yourself.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to do that again. It's kind of lonely. I missed you guys up there. Like, where are my friends demoing with me? I'm all by myself.
And now I'd like to introduce Jeff. And now I'm going to keep going. It's me, Jeff.
We had so much news to share this year, and a lot. Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll go through it, from Cortex to Fluid to Spaces to security and compliance stuff, that I felt like I had to play this connective role between the high level that Satya and Jared Spatar had done for Microsoft 365 Up and all the detailed sessions. So I was trying to not go into all the details on all the areas, but keep them into perspective for people so they saw like how the Fluid framework related to SharePoint or how Project Cortex related to the rest of the things we're doing.
But you have your own unique spin on it, and this audience has their own unique reactions. Speaking as someone who wrote a book about managed metadata services 10 years ago, I loved seeing like spontaneous multiple bursts of applause for those updates.
I know. Every time you think, like, I wonder how many people use this feature. I see in the data a fair amount do, and then you see they're all sitting in the front row. Is he going to do anything with metadata?
So before we get into talking about the specifics that you unleashed today on the world, there's this notion that a lot of the recent innovation that we've been doing revolves around making the cloud easier, either for users or admins, and it makes it a lot more customer-centric. And that could be a self-service notion for the end user, or, again, cloud admins being able to do more. But if you were to take that customer perspective, what does it mean for a customer of any size? But if you have any thoughts in particular for what does that mean for the customer?
We've always tried to be customer-focused in the team, and this year, across Microsoft 365 internally, we have a big customer-driven initiative. And one of the things, I'm the exec sponsor for that. And one of the things we're trying to do is get everybody, even brand new engineers who are just joining the team, to meet with and just listen to a customer. Because we sometimes understandably get so caught up in the tech industry with the latest thing that we lose sight of the impact it's having. We've done that with a lot of people in the team where they've gotten to meet customers. And I tried to frame it up front in the talk that there's really two types of things we do. One that is very customer-driven responsive things. Chris just mentioned the new term store experience, very much led by customers. There's others where we're, I think, leading customers. You could say we were out in front on the cloud before most customers were ready, AI similarly. And so what we tried to do throughout the talk is use customers like Mott MacDonald and Velux and Nestle and the Henson Company to frame that what they were getting out of being in Microsoft 365, that they were getting more employee engagement, more collaboration across their organization, the ability to automate business processes, the ability to discover knowledge, the Mott MacDonald case study we showed. So we tried to draw this thread from what we've done in the past to customer value they've gotten out of it, to the inspiration we've gotten from customers for the announcements we've made. And so I thought it flowed pretty well, but we'll see what customers think.
It's interesting. And I know that we've had that initiative to get our starting engineers out in front of customers. One thing that I think but the audience doesn't know, is in getting ready for Project Cortex, as we'll talk about later. I went to 12 focus groups around the U.S., and I was behind a one-way mirror. So it's one thing to talk to a customer, but it's quite another thing to have a customer talk about you when you're not as directly connected, because you really get a new insight as to what they really get value from and where their actual pain points are. It's just a fascinating experience.
Yeah. In fact, it's a good thing you mentioned that. One of the things we put in the posters on this customer-driven campaign is don't go talk to customers, go listen to customers. And be a good listener, because sometimes they'll tell you very directly what they want from you, like give us a new, better term store UI. Sometimes they will express in other ways unmet needs that they won't necessarily articulate precisely, but if you're a good listener, you'll hear, their problem is they need to automate a lot of business processes and they don't have the budget to do all that. What we really need to do is make sure that we have low-code, no-code solutions that cut across our apps. And Satya set the tone for that. When he came in, one of the first leadership meetings, he said, he looked at the engineering side of the room and said, hey, you product leaders, I don't want you sending me too many emails celebrating revenues. I want you to celebrate usage. Let the sales guys focus on getting the business results. And to some extent, that's often a trailing indicator that usage is the thing that really leads to, are people seeing value out of Microsoft 365? If they are seeing value out of it, they'll bet on our new capabilities. If they don't, they won't invest more in it. And so we've been very much focused. You see the data in customer success, and how many of our top 400 customers have modern intranets? How many of our Office 365 users, Microsoft 365 users, are actually using OneDrive? Are they using the mobile apps? If not, why not? Who are the ones that are using the most? Let's call them up and see what they're doing. So very customer usage centric.
Mm-hmm. Let's tee you guys up, because I know both of you, Chris and Jeff, have been pretty deeply involved in Project Cortex. So your first thoughts on sort of where we started with Project Cortex, the why we're doing it, and then maybe getting into the what.
Yeah, it was interesting. When I was transitioning out from talking about 100 million cloud monthly active users, your previous comment about SharePoint Online, into the product stuff, I thought, how do you break the fourth wall? And I thought, let's remind folks that the team name that we originally had for the team that built SharePoint was PKM, or Publishing and Knowledge Management, where we had this idea if we could digitize information and organize it automatically for people, they could find it and discover it better. And the problem was at the time that we didn't have the data, the computing power, the algorithms to do it well. And in the last few years, we've gotten all those things. And so we took a fresh crack at it with what we called Project Cortex. It had several different other code names before we got to the one we went with the public. But the idea is there is a very diverse set of AI and ML technologies we can apply to different problems for capturing, organizing, and navigating information. And so we'd come at this talking to our SharePoint customers and other customers and harvesting some of the AI technology. And then a few months ago, there was a CEO event that Satya spoke to. He said, hey, I think I'm hearing from the CEOs I'm talking to that the skill crisis is really top of mind, that the baby boomers retiring, too much outsourcing of critical functions, millennials coming in and wanting to have an impact faster than ever. And so how do you get people up to speed and enable them to stay up to speed? It was the sort of convergence of a set of technologies that were ready for prime time and a set of customer needs. In the venture capitalist lore, one of the things the VCs asked all startups is, why now? Why are you here making me a pitch now? Are you too late where somebody else has done it, or too early where the tech is not, or the market's not ready? And I think we decided about a year ago, why now? The timing's right. Customers have gotten comfortable in the cloud. The data's in the cloud. The business need of harvesting knowledge to improve their skills is greater than ever. And these AI technologies are ready. So that's sort of my angle on it.
It's interesting. One of the things, just in talking to customers this week, that have really had a new insight on, which I shouldn't have a new insight. I've been steeped in this stuff for almost 2 years. But notwithstanding our investments in AI, we talk a lot about we're going to deliver knowledge in the apps that people are already using. And I think that's true. But I think to the why now point, is we have Microsoft Graph. And we have the signals that allow people to contribute knowledge through the apps they're already doing. We're not asking people to learn new contribution behaviors, but we're learning from their existing contribution behaviors. And I do think that we are at the right place at the right time. I certainly hope so.
Yeah. And one of the things that's been fascinating about this, as you know, Chris, as you've worked on the storytelling with just tons of customers and partners and given us great feedback on the product and the messaging, is category creation is tricky. A lot of things that happen in tech, there's one or two or three other major competitors that sort of define the category and the terminology you use. And so that, there's frames of reference of, hey, this thing is the competitive version of that thing. And certainly we have some of this. One of the things that's really exciting about Project Cortex, but also a little bit challenging, is there isn't a competitive frame for it. We are, I think, doing something unique. And so that's why we've latched onto things like, hey, it's going to automatically generate your enterprise Wikipedia for you, just to give it some sort of frame of reference that people would know about. And so it's been fascinating to watch you and product managers try to figure out how to break through in the storytelling about it.
Yeah, I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
But again, listening to our customers is the best way to learn how much further we have to go.
So one other big project was announced the acquisition of Mover. So in the migration space, we're doing a number of things, but can you describe a little bit about sort of the same frame of question, why Mover, why now?
Yeah. And
then how does it fit into our migration portfolio?
We've seen, it's not hyperbole, exponential growth in the amount of data coming into Microsoft 365 over the last several years, both through migration and organic. And as it's grown and as customers have gotten comfortable that the cloud was the best place to store your data, a couple of years ago now we released the SharePoint migration tool. And it was really fascinating when we did it, because all sources of migration hockey sticked, both our partners' ingestion into the service and our own through our first-party migration tool. And over the last year or so, we've seen more and more customers. Some of them we've done in case studies, and some of them, don't want to share publicly the data. But we've seen a ton of companies express interest in moving from some of these other cloud platforms. These other products are quite good, but people come to us and say they want to move from Dropbox or Google Drive or Box to Microsoft 365. And so we've been watching this space and some of the partners that we work with, and it was clear Mover was, not the only game in town. There's a lot of really great migration partners, but they were doing a particularly good job, and it was a good fit because they were focused primarily on migration. And so we went to them. They'd done some of the largest box migrations that we'd seen. And I went and talked to Eric and Mark, and they were game. And so we're excited to do that. It's an acquisition where you buy a company that's in the past selling their product, and we announced today that we're giving it away for free. Our goal there is to reduce the friction to get people to move to Microsoft 365. I think there's sort of two things I want to get out there. One is that now's the right time to move to the cloud. Better collaboration, better security. So customers, we've just made it easier. And the second is for everybody, our migration, we're going to continue to work with and invest in our relationship with other migration partners. Everything we buy or build here, we're going to platformize so great partners can build on top of it.
I think that we can't emphasize that enough. For what we've seen is over the past year alone, the number of newer players entering the migration space who are dealing with really complex workloads, who are moving the big iron ECM systems to the cloud. I do think it is a continuation of a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
If I can have someone else focus on moving my collaborative content, then I can turn my efforts to my mission critical content and bring all of it to M365.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, as I said, I announced the 100 million monthly active user number. We didn't go into a lot of other stats because I thought it would be more dramatic just to have one stat on the page. But we are now getting people moving, pun intended, petabytes of content into Microsoft 365 every week. We're getting more new content in the service every week than a few years ago we had total.
Right.
So it's great to have the mover option for that.
Yeah, it seems like both the acquisition and the progress that both the Fast Track team is making, your own team with the SharePoint migration tool, it's really just all about making it more frictionless. With a lot more tooling and capabilities for no matter where you have content, source to destination, Microsoft 365 is ready.
Yeah, and then you immediately get richer collaboration and better security.
One final thought on migration before next topic. You mentioned the 100 million now. There's the other 100 that we talked about that affects both good for migration, good for sync, good for how people work with big files.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the 100 gigabyte new limit?
So we're very customer focused about what are the things that keep sets of customers or subsets of their content moving to the cloud. And so you see things like we announced the information barriers work today. That's something where investment bankers tell us if, we won't move to the cloud unless you enforce information barriers in the product. And so we did that for them. And so similarly, there was a set of folks that would say, hey, we tried to migrate all our data to the cloud. We got 99.9% of it. But we've got some large files, zip files, PSTs, videos, AutoCAD, Adobe. So that, it's tricky to do that over flaky internet connections, just to be frank. Even though TCP adds a reliability layer over IP and HTTP adds some stuff over TCP, it's still, if you're constantly failing and retrying, that it'll never get done. So we did some work, a lot of work in the storage system and the protocols in SharePoint to support that. In fact, it is the exact same work. I think I'm not allowed to use the code name for it, for the next generation storage system that underlines SharePoint that we're also using for the Fluid framework, where we have much more fine-grained addressability of the blobs in Azure Blob that make up a file. And we did low-level file system work in SharePoint and with Azure and with the Azure networking team so that when the network comes and goes, we can keep sending data back and forth. And it's kind of funny. It's the same engineering work that is enabling both old school gigantic files to be moved reliably, as well as new school lightning fast Fluid framework applications to be built that are just updating small pieces of data.
I remember, there's a way to frame the journey is there used to be the 2 gig SQL limit.
Yeah.
That for a long time felt like, 2 gigs is a pretty large file. And then when we bumped over that to 10 to 15,
it's always, 64K is all you ever need.
Well, I forgot we were announcing this week. Ben Yellen told me the site collection limit. There were
2 million.
Yeah, we now support 2 million site collections in a tenant, which sounds kind of crazy. Like 2 million sites, don't do.
Our limit before that wasn't that limiting. 500,000 was our limit before that.
Yeah, huge architectural investments at the cutting edge of low-level storage technologies with Azure. I think I mentioned this at the SharePoint conference. We're the biggest Azure consumer there is, both for Azure Blob and SQL Server. And we have people in the trenches working with them in the Azure Blob networking SQL code, optimizing it for SharePoint use cases so that we get the performance and reliability and scale. And obviously that helps all people using Azure. But when we spend billions of dollars running Microsoft 365 on behalf of customers, we have the maximal incentive to invest in that Azure storage layer. And so we've been excited to partner with them on it.
It's fascinating, too. If you've been around the Microsoft tech space for a while, as I have, some of the things we were talking about, we were saying this before about knowledge, in the 90s, the promise of DCOM and OLE and all the ways that you were supposed to get to a component architecture, the processing power wasn't quite there yet, and I feel like we're approaching the frontier where we can do that.
Yeah, and then we've been helped a lot. One thing that inside in the engineering group we look at, Fluid is like a massively multiplayer game under the covers. It's not really an analogy you'd make to somebody who's trying to do doc collaboration, but the ability to have a low latency WebSocket based protocol that can go around the world as people play, and that the state of the game is reconciled. It's actually a really hard problem. We can geek out on computer gaming for a little bit.
Well, we have a CEO who did Minecraft in his keynote this morning.
If somebody's moving their joystick and another person across the planet's playing with them and they're showing up at the same scene, it's actually quite tricky at 60 frames per second and the speed of light and all that to get that reconciled in the game. And so a lot of the internet protocols and routing, TCP was too heavyweight to address those scenarios, have evolved on pure IP-based things, and WebSockets gave web developers an easier way to program those. You saw people embrace WebSockets for various collaborative applications like we did. And so we've sort of progressed to generalizing that in the Fluid framework. That's the sort of geeky side. The end user side is you will be able to grab a table, stick it in Teams, fill it out, and have that table linked into PowerPoint.
So let's talk about the intranet. You talked a lot about landing, SharePoint home sites and a ton of value that is now inside of them. Multi-lingual, of course, the metadata-driven navigation. What were some of the things that you either heard from afterwards or have been hearing that people are really liking about home sites now coming to general availability?
Yeah. I find there's two camps of people, the people who follow us closely and the people not so much. The people who follow us closely would say to us, we love what you've been talking about a holistic solution for the internet, how there's communication sites and collaboration sites, how those can be aggregated up into a hub, how you have a home that's a specific type of hub that's the parent of the organization. And we love, the fact that it's way out of box and you have greater design sensibility and so forth. But here's a handful of pain points for you. We want to customize the search results. We really need multilingual. We need page scheduling. And so as we got those sort of horizontal things out of the way, we could get to those very specific things. And I think we hit most of them today so that the people who have been following us closely and either deployed an intranet or been holding off, we've got the things they need in terms of authoring and search and home sites. And as well as showing some exciting new things. We saw, it's rare in one demo where you show the GA of a feature and then you show it's already evolving. And we showed the Your Feed on home sites, which is the ability to have a personalized set of content based on the graph that we're going to bring to home sites. So it's a space we're continuing to iterate on. And I think the segment of our users who know what we're doing really, this was the last big set of blockers, if you will.
Yep. I think in the internet space, when I was a little bit more focused on it, there was the two asks: make it more beautiful and make it not boring. Yeah. Make it so that people come back and there's something new.
Yeah. Well, then you get to the second group who maybe, I can't believe it, they're not reading every blog that I write or you guys write. They are busy. Maybe they've paid attention, but they have a lot of people in their organization that may not have looked at what you can do in the cloud with SharePoint. They think of their intranet as what was custom built 5 years ago. And so there the biggest, my favorite thing we did to communicate our vision was the Look Book last year. And we've got the simple URL, lookbook.microsoft.com, so people can have something that in seconds they can share and say, here's what an intranet looks like. Microsoft does this out of box now. You can go to our and create and provision a new site based on one of those lookbook templates and have it. Oh, I'm not supposed to snap with a Microsoft microphone. That's right. So I think we took a big leap ahead for the internet with a lot of exciting news.
I think there's maybe a lot of CMOs that are not getting quoted, but I'll quote for them, that are saying, please make my intranet look like SharePoint. Whereas maybe before they were saying a little bit sort of the opposite with our classic.
It's always reassuring. Ian Story, my colleague in engineering, and I were at the AIM Leadership Council a couple of weeks ago. And one of the members of the council, and I can't say what the company name is yet, he's like, hey, I want to show you something. And he showed how his entire organization structures and communicates on project status through news and sites, and to look at it looks like exactly the way that we work. And it's just, it makes me happy to see that, like, oh, we're not just building these things in a void, but we're delivering things that aren't just like answering a problem, but they're part of a solution. And it's great to see that.
Yeah, and that brings up one thing that seemed like a little feature in the keynote today, but is, I think, canonical for the kinds of things we're doing, which is the photography. So we spend a lot of money to license royalty photography.
Royalty-free.
Royalty-free. Sorry. Thank you. That in PowerPoint and in SharePoint, when you want to create something to make a positive impression, you can hunt around for the internet on the internet and search engines and get pictures, but they're often not good, and you have to filter through those. And then the good ones aren't covered by Creative Commons. And so just a little thing right within the SharePoint user experience, add a title, add a sort of something to the title region for SharePoint News, and you can find a gorgeous piece of photography that will help convey your message more quickly and give a more professional impression of your work.
There was one other small feature that the way I liked how you framed it in your session, you said it was one of your favorite features from the Norwegian team.
Oh, yeah.
So walk us through a little bit about what the Norwegians are up to and what you like about it.
Yeah. The FAST team, who we acquired in 2008, last year they had their 10th anniversary. Bjorn Olstad, who's the CTO of FAST, still runs the team. Terrific team. I go visit them every year. And what they did is we evolved from search to a graph that powers a lot of experience. They build that sort of personalized graph for every user and the sort of tenant graph of what's most relevant across the organization. And they use a lot of fancy technologies, and they give them Norwegian names. Like, I'm not supposed to say code names, but one of them is Yggdrasil, which is the tree of life in Norwegian mythology. And a lot of the user experience in Microsoft 365 isn't queries against SharePoint's native data structures in SQL or in Exchange, but against a tailored data structure that's sort of a cache of the graph for incredibly high performance joining of different data. And so a couple years ago, I said, the thing I really want is, if I'm looking at a document, show me all the conversations that reference that document. I can do the reverse. I can find an email thread in Outlook that has a link to a document and say, oh, Mark gave me feedback on the email about changing the slide. I'll go do that. But the trouble is, if it's not all in one thread, and these things are never all in one thread, you've got to go hunt for email after email, and you have to do that over and over again. And so I said, give me in the graph this sort of hyper-fast thing, because I don't want people to ask for it. I just want to hover it and show them. Like, nobody's going to know they can do this, so let's just show them the related conversations. And so we went out there this time last year, and said, okay, now's the time to do it, but I have an additional ask for you. And they said, oh, what's that? And I said, I don't want it to just be Outlook. I want it to be Teams conversations as well. And so it was so great to show running code in the demo today. Hover on a file, you see the summarized description of the document, and then you scroll down and you see the multiple Outlook and Teams conversations referencing that file, so I can go one by one and address the feedback if it's come in that form.
Yeah, it's funny, and that's a use case that I hit all the time. Like, I know I was talking about this file with someone, but who and where?
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting. We wanted to ask you a couple of questions about how you use SharePoint and the rest of the tools across Office. Yeah. And what's your favorite new feature? And I think you may have said it, but
I don't know. I like all the children. I certainly I'm getting jazzed about more and more integration between Stream and SharePoint. I started doing this thing. If you schedule an hour meeting or 45-minute meeting, it's a big imposition on people's time. Why don't I see if I can do a 15-minute stand-up with the leaders in my team? And so a couple months ago, I created a block on the calendar where in 15 minutes, I did, here's our strategy, and here's my top 10 top of mind. And so in SharePoint, as we publish various news articles, I hope more and more of them include video, summaries of customer interviews, screenshots of the product, leadership conversations with folks like me. So I think the things that we showed with Stream integration with SharePoint, and one of the things that was fun, we showed briefly in the keynote, is the noise cancellation. Because if I do a crappy job recording the thing and there's a lot of background noise, wouldn't it be great to apply, filter out the noise? So anyway, that might not have been the one you were thinking of, but that was one that's sort of been top of mind for me the last couple of days.
But if you filtered out the noise with me, Mark, there'd be nothing left to say.
Well, the last big topic that we wanted to get to, and then we wanted to, we know where you're going next and sort of the excitement you're going to bring to the European side of things. But the topic is really around accessibility. I know your teams go through a lot of experience reviews for each feature, and they go through a lot of accessibility reviews. But to get your take on, obviously, the importance of it, but how you put that importance, through your teams to really go through solid accessibility reviews.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's a really important topic, and it's not only one that it's great to talk about our responsibility, but it's also important to talk about us as a role model for others. Satya's articulated the mission of the company to empower every person and organization on the planet. And that means everyone. And so many people have some sort of challenge. It may be physical, it may be cognitive, learning disabilities like dyslexia, they might be blind or deaf. And our products have particularly even more potential benefit to those communities because they can unlock access to information and careers in a way that maybe that weren't as accessible to them in the past. And so we see it as our responsibility and privilege, frankly, to not only create accessible tools, so somebody who happens to be blind should be able to use Office, but also help people use those tools to create accessible content. So the Office documents they have, if they have a picture, they have alternative text automatically generated for them. If it's a SharePoint site, the tabbing through in the work with screen readers should work just great. One of the other things that in my role in Office I've been incredibly privileged to work on is the learning tools. So for people that have dyslexia, cognitive learning abilities, the ability to take a page and break it into constituent syllables and read it to people slowly so they can master the concept has really been transformative for a lot of people and very much core to our mission. So we're thrilled to participate with those communities and get their feedback. But I also think as a successful company, it's a privilege to be a role model for companies of all sizes that try to make their facilities, their employment, their interaction with customers available to everybody. Really proud and humbled by this part of our work.
It may sound a little bit weird coming from the marketing person that's just always foaming, ready to release all the good stuff that you've been doing. But in the what we call red room, before something goes to production, when something fails accessibility, I love that nobody just goes, just push it through, just go for it. And it's okay to fail at accessibility. It just means it's not yet ready. They go and work on it and they get it ready. But I really love the rigor of ensuring that it has good accessibility.
No, absolutely. Several years ago, honestly, we didn't have that bar. Even today, every now and then, somebody who might be new to our team says, come on, we'll get to that later. And this is a place where we're saying, no, there is no later. There's no date. If we failed an accessibility test for something that we were going to launch at Ignite this week, we'd say, fine. We're not we'll say it's coming at Ignite. And in fact, sometimes when people give us feedback, we wish you were a little bit more predictable on your disclosure, it's because sometimes we learn things close to the end, and sometimes we learn accessibility issues. And I'm going to tell the team it's more important to hold the product until it's accessible than worry about the exact commitment on the date that we've made at an event.
It's interesting. We had Megan Lawrence and some other folks in the show back in the spring. We were talking about accessibility and disability. And one of the things that I learned in that is that it's not us and them. Almost everyone at some point in their life will experience a disability or an accessibility issue. And it may be that you break your arm skiing and you can't use a keyboard for 3 months or something. But everyone goes through this at some point, and it's really, we all benefit by doing this. I think it's a great topic.
And it's a great reinforcing mindset to not fall in the trap about tech is for the elite. It's for everybody. And who better than the tech leaders, us being one of them, to step up and make the work we're doing empowering to everybody, not just for, as Satya said, what did he say? The West Coast of the United States and the East Coast of China. We're trying to make everybody have access to the latest technologies.
So it's just about time for us to wrap up. 2 very quick questions. And one we all know the answer to. When is your next keynote?
The next one is the European SharePoint Conference in Prague, early December. Please, Europeans out there, we'd love to have you come. They do an amazing job. The ESPC team, the SharePoint team, and some of our other friends from other product groups come out in force. Of course, it's a big SharePoint party, but we're going to talk about Teams and Power Apps and lots of other good stuff. So hope to see you. Project Cortex.
Well, before we say thank you, Jeff, we have to ask, maybe with a different set of kicks, so put your OneDrive vans aside, where did you last run? Any big last race that you want to share?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I ran the Berlin Marathon. It was awesome until it started raining, and it was still awesome, but it was just soggy. So I'm privileged to be able to do these. Okay, maybe I can break a little news. TJ, the CEO of AvePoint, he and I have run a couple of these together, and he and I are going to run the Boston Marathon in the spring, and we're both doing it for the Red Cross to raise money. And I probably stole some of AvePoint's thunder, but you'll see more from them about TJ and I doing that race in the spring. So it's hard. Boston's very hilly, and so I'm training in the hills of
Heartbreak Hill, right next to Boston College.
Mile 23.
I can never resist the chance to get a Boston sports reference.
Just about to say.
Yeah, really sorry, by the way, about the Patriots not being undefeated last night.
Not.
Yeah, it's quite a shame.
But the Seahawks pulled it out, man.
Yes, they did. Russell, it is true what I put on Twitter that I was rehearsing for the keynote multiple times to try to get under 45 minutes, which I then blew in the keynote. But
I think you were asking Dan, can I get back to the game?
Yeah.
Can I get to the game now?
I turned it back on, and the Seahawks are down again in the fourth quarter, and oh my God, and Russell Wilson's throwing touchdown after touchdown. So anyway.
Excellent. Well, to your teal shirt and your OneDrive shoes, it sounds like you had a great day.
I did.
We certainly appreciate you coming here and wrapping it all up to give our audience, both on the West Coast, the East Coast, and across the seas in Europe, a nice insight into everything that you shared.
It's great to be here. Thanks, guys. You do an amazing job. I always hear good feedback on the podcast.
Thanks. So always great to hear from Jeff, and really nice to hear, obviously, your project through Jeff's eyes, Project Cortex. It was kind of fun to hear. So we've gotten the sense of what Jeff did and what he shared all day today. What was your day one here at Ignite like?
Well, my day one was really about making sure we were landing the right messages around Project Cortex, and then to take it and watch it play out through Satya's keynote, through Jared Spataro's, and then through Jeff's. And each has a different audience and a different constituency. And it has led me to be kind of nervously watching the numbers to make sure we're getting the uptake. But it's really encouraging to see the stuff that we've been working on for so long is paying off. What's your day been like?
My day probably started similar to yours, making sure the blogs went out. I had 2 blogs that I wrote, and I've been working with Ankita Kirti on the OneDrive, and she had a new customer evidence one. So we had 4 blogs that we were making sure went up, and similar to you, watching that through the day and how people's reactions were and what the metrics were like. But I also had kind of a fun middle part where I just went down into the hub to check out how is our booth doing, how prepped are the OneDrive and the SharePoint booths, and everybody there was doing great. I ran into your friend Naomi Moneypenny, who we talked to recently. But the fun part was, as I was standing there, the keynote was going on with Satya, and so I went to where they were going to do some of the Microsoft 365 innovation, the Teams demo, and your Project Cortex. I had no idea that Satya was going to come down into the hub. So I was just standing there.
That you were just minding your own business.
Really, I just was excited to see. And then all of a sudden, it was just sort of like this swell of everybody. And then there was Satya just cruising down. And my brain was like, aren't you supposed to be doing a keynote, man? But it was really neat to see. And the hub was really hopping today. Then I went over to go see Jared Spataro and Dan Holmes. So Jared talked about a lot of things, but certainly Dan Holmes gave some great demos. I've never seen so much demoed today in such short periods of time. Really well done.
Yes.
I think well received and complimentary to obviously all the other stuff that Jared. So after that, then coming here and hanging out at WonderWorks with you and Jeff was a nice compliment to the end of my day.
As always, it's a pleasure doing the show with you, Mark. And you should also know the numbers I'm checking are the Intrazone numbers for our special edition edition of the Intrazone about Project Cortex. And it's great to see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of views coming in on it already.
So. Yeah. We'd love to be able to compliment everything you're doing and obviously put out something that gives a little bit more context to Cortex.
I saw what you did there.
We want to thank Jeff Teper, our guest today. He is the CVP of OneDrive, SharePoint, and Office, and of course always gives us great insight to all the good, big innovation announcements.
You can check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. Go to aka.ms/theintrazone.
Send us your questions or feedback for the SharePoint engineering and product teams. You can email us at theintrazone@microsoft.com or on Twitter @SharePoint, @mcashman, and @cmcnulty2000.
Tell all your friends and colleagues, not just some of them, but all of them about the show. Share that SharePoint love. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, at the Hub, at the European SharePoint Conference, even online. And if you love the show, please write us a review.
We thank you for being with us here live at Ignite 2019. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. You've been listening to The Intrazone, a show about the brainstem, the cortex, all this knowledge center amazingness that's happening in the Microsoft 365 intelligent intranet.